All right, today we're doing something really cool. We're going way, way back, to the very beginning, to the first spark that really kicked off the whole AI revolution. We're going to talk about something called the perceptron. It's this simple, really elegant idea that, believe it or not, is the fundamental building block for all the crazy neural networks we use today. So yeah, let's trace it all back to that very first spark.
So it really all boils down to this one simple, kind of wild question. What if you could build a brain, but not with cells and gooey stuff, but just with a handful of simple on-off switches? I mean, think about that for a second. That was the radical idea that got this whole ball rolling.
Okay, so if we really want to get a handle on the massive AI models of today, we have to rewind, way back. We have to start with the OG, the very first artificial neuron. So, picture this. It's 1958. A researcher named Frank Rosenblatt comes up with something he calls the perceptron, and it was a huge deal. It's basically an algorithm that tries to copy what a real biological neuron does. But its job? Super simple. All it had to do was look at some information and make a basic decision. Yes or no. That's it. A binary choice.
So, how does this thing actually think? Well, it's a really neat four-step process. First, it takes in some data points. We call them inputs. Step 2, and this is key, it assigns a weight to each one. Kind of like saying, this piece of info is way more important than that one. Then, for step 3, it just adds up all those weighted inputs. Simple math. And the final step is the decision. If that total number crosses a certain line, a threshold, it fires and says yes or 1. If it doesn't cross that line, it just stays quiet and says no or 0.
And here's the really amazing part. Just with that simple setup, this little perceptron could actually start to learn the basic building blocks of logic, the kind of stuff computers are built on. Let's take a super simple example, the AND gate. It's a fundamental piece of computer logic. The rule is dead simple. You only get a 1, or a true, if both of your inputs, let's call them X and Y, are also 1. In every other situation, the answer is always 0.
Okay, so check this out. This is where it gets cool. A perceptron can learn to be an AND gate perfectly. All you have to do is set the weight for both inputs to 1 and then set the firing threshold to 2. Think about it. The only way you can get a total sum of 2 is if both input X and input Y are 1. Any other combination just won't hit that threshold. It's a flawless solution.
All right, so that's AND. Now what about a slightly different problem, the OR gate? With this one, you get a 1 if either input X is 1 or input Y is 1. The only time you get a 0 is when both of them are 0.
Now you might think you need a whole new machine for this, but you don't. To turn our AND perceptron into an OR perceptron, we only have to change one single number. We just lower that threshold from 2 down to 1, and boom! Now if either input is a 1, the total sum hits the threshold and it fires. And that right there, that's the core idea of learning for these early AIs. It's not some mystical process, it's just about tweaking the numbers.
So for a little while, everyone was pretty hyped. It looked like this simple little model could learn to solve anything you threw at it. But then they hit a wall. Researchers found a fatal flaw, a seemingly simple problem that a single perceptron was just completely powerless against. And this, of course, led to a huge question. Is this little thing really intelligent? Or have we already found its limits? Could it really solve every simple logic problem out there? The problem child was something called the XOR gate, which stands for exclusive OR. Now the rule here is a little bit trickier. You get a 1 only when the inputs are different from each other. So a 1 and a 0 gives you a 1. But if both inputs are the same, both zeros or both 1s, the output is 0. It has to be one or the other, exclusively, but not both. And this simple puzzle was the perceptron's kryptonite. The technical reason is something called linear separability. But here's an easy way to think about it. A single perceptron makes its decision by drawing a single straight line on a graph. All the yes answers are on one side, all the no answers are on the other. But for the XOR problem, you just can't do it. There is no way to draw one single straight line to separate the correct answers. No matter where you draw it, you'll always have a point on the wrong side. For a single neuron, this was literally an unsolvable problem. And I'm not kidding, this discovery almost killed the entire field of AI right then and there. It was a huge setback. But the solution, when it finally arrived, was so elegant and it changed everything. The secret wasn't to build a more complicated neuron. It was to start connecting the simple ones together. The big breakthrough came when someone looked at the problem differently. They asked, what if we don't try to solve XOR directly? What if we build it out of the pieces we already know how to solve? Because, as it turns out, the logic for XOR can be written another way. It's the same as saying X or Y and not X and Y.
So what if you created a little team of perceptrons? Imagine this. You have a first layer, a hidden layer. One perceptron in that layer just calculates X or Y. Another one calculates not X and Y. Then you add a second layer, an output layer with just one final perceptron. Its only job is to take the answers from that first layer and do an AND operation. It's like a little assembly line of logic.
And what do you know? It works perfectly. Let's just walk through that tricky case where both inputs are 1. Okay, so the OR neuron in the first layer sees 2 1s, so it outputs a 1. The not AND neuron also sees 2 1s, which means AND is true, so not AND is false. It outputs a 0. Now the final neuron gets a 1 and a 0. It performs an AND operation, and the result is 0, which is exactly what XOR XER is supposed to do. By working together, this team of simple neurons solved the unsolvable.
In that moment right there, solving that one single impossible puzzle, that was it. That was the real beginning, the true dawn of what we now call deep learning. This whole idea, stacking layers of these simple little decision makers to tackle harder problems, that structure got a name, the multi-layer perceptron, or MLP. And you should remember that name, because it is the direct great-great-great-great-grandparent of every massive, world-changing neural network we have today.
This is what we mean when we talk about depth in deep learning. A shallow network, like the one we just built to solve XOR, has maybe one hidden layer. It can solve specific, tricky problems. But a deep network? Well, that's when you start stacking many, many hidden layers. And that's what allows an AI to learn the insanely complex patterns needed for things like recognizing your face or translating languages in real time.
Really, the main lesson from that whole saga is the same principle that drives AI research today. Stacking layers gives these networks way more power to represent complex ideas. It lets them solve these messy, real-world, nonlinear problems that a single neuron just can't touch.
So when you boil it all down, the big takeaway from the story of the perceptron is this. Astonishing intelligence doesn't always come from making the building blocks more complex. It emerges from figuring out clever ways to combine the simple ones.
So I'll leave you with this thought. Back then, just adding one extra layer was enough to solve a problem that people thought was literally unsolvable. Today, we're building networks with hundreds, even thousands of layers. So it kind of makes you wonder, right? What unsolvable problems are we about to unlock next?